Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Andy McAfee. I am the co-founder and co-director of the MIT Initiative on the Digital Economy, and we are here to talk about where the skills of the future are going to come from. How are they going to be acquired? Who's going to deliver them? And how do we make this market overall work better? Luckily, I've got some all-stars to help me talk about this, including my MIT colleague, Professor Paul Osterman at the Sloan School with me, Freeman Hrabowski, who is the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Juan Salgado is the chancellor of the City Colleges of Chicago. And Frida, Polli, who is the former colleague of ours at MIT, and now the CEO and founder of Pymetrics. Frida, I want to start with you. We rely right now very heavily on kind of the classic measures of assessing somebody's talent and their skills, where they went to school, what their GPA was, these kind of hard credentials. If I understand you right, there are shortcomings with that approach and we can do better. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And what I would like, just to further expand on that, Andrew, I think we need to move away from an over-reliance on hard skills and really move towards measuring people's soft skills in a better way. And the reason I say that is because, Deloitte and others have put out papers stating that, the shelf life of a hard skill is very short these days, right? And so if your job goes away, if your resume all of a sudden becomes irrelevant, which, by the way, happened to me when I went from academia to entrepreneurship, you need to understand what your future potential for a role is, not so much what you've done in the past, right? And that really is, I think, the goal that we should all have going forward, is to understand someone's future potential. And that's what soft skills allow us to do, is understand someone's personality, cognition, and social emotional aptitude for roles that they may have never done historically. The other benefit, I think, to soft skill assessment and evaluation is really that it allows us to mitigate some of the problems that we have with hard skills. So hard skills tend to map very closely to sort of socioeconomic categories, as well as, race and gender. So if we're trying to find something that is more equitable, both from a race, gender, and socioeconomic perspective, I think soft skills are hugely important on that front. So I can go on, but I think those are some of the main reasons that we want to, at a minimum, marry our love of hard skills with something like a soft skill assessment as well.
Let me ask you one quick follow-up.
Sure.
When a lot of us hear soft, we think difficult, if not impossible to quantify. Again, you probably don't agree with that.
Right. Well, so that's what I spent my time at MIT and at Harvard doing, is quantifying soft skills. And as my colleagues like to say, soft skills are hard to measure, no pun intended or pun intended, but it is possible. That's what behavioral scientists have been doing for a long time. And we have developed ever more sort of objective ways of looking at people's behavior to understand their soft skill fit. And again, Pymetrics is a system. There are other systems. We're not, we're agnostic as to how you do it. But behavioral science has definitely come into the foreground to a place where essentially it is possible to measure these hard skills in a way that is objective and quantifiable. And so whatever measurement system you use for that, I think that is a very, very strong path forward in understanding people's future fit to roles, which is so critical these days, and also balancing some of these inequalities that we see in society.
Fantastic. Thank you. I was remiss. I want to remind everybody listening here, part of this event, please feel free to submit questions. I don't want to be the only one peppering our panelists with questions. We have the opportunity for you to submit questions. Please do so, and we'll make this as lively and wide-ranging a discussion as we can. Freeman, I'd love to turn to you. One of the things that really kind of puzzles or even annoys economists is markets that don't clear. In other words, persistent supply-demand balances are kind of not supposed to exist, but we keep on hearing about this large persistent skills gap. The market for skills, the demand for skills from companies, and the supply from the labor market from educational institutions seems to have a big persistent mismatch. Is that right? And if so, can you help us understand why that mismatch is so big and what we can do to close this gap?
Right. Thanks, Andy. First of all, I agree with Frida that we need both the soft skills and the hard skills. We need to find ways of measuring if we're going to close some of the gaps that we talk about. Let me just say that I see the problem as less one of a mismatch and more of a challenge of understanding what we can do to strengthen the academic preparation of large numbers of students, and to measure and having ways of measuring their strengths overall, a strengths-based approach. UMBC produces about a third of the technology graduates, IT bachelors in our state. We are a public research campus, but we have this strong belief that we should be thinking about two things. One, the bachelor's degree is still a measure that many will use at least. Others will say the AA degree. Others will say post-secondary education, and we need all of them. The advantage of the bachelor's degree is that you're getting that broad liberal background and you learn how to think. One of the most important skills or approaches that we need to talk about is how to make sure people know how to think, how to learn, how to adapt. And that's very important. But even in that and when you think about that, the Greater Washington Partnership, which is consisting of employers and universities from Virginia up through Baltimore, through the DC area, has been looking at ways of developing certificates, generalist certificates and specialist certificates, to increase the number of people to fill these jobs. The Accenture just published a study that showed that there were 60,000 jobs being unfilled because we don't have the people with the skills. And so there are two things I would say. Number one, there are large numbers of people who are getting a broad liberal arts background in humanities, social sciences, who can be given additional skills, what we're calling now this generalist specialist and certificate, in order to get into this technology business, because that's the only way we can fill all these jobs. And number two, even with the people who are graduating in computer science, we are looking at ways of identifying the particular skills that employers are looking for, such as machine learning, or whether it's AI, or whether it's data science. And then the other piece of that I wanted to mention is that we have a training company working with employers from DOD to some of the private sector companies to give students, sometimes who are veterans, sometimes who are still in the military, in the intelligence community, those certificates, those credentials that can help them move up the ladder, and to bring back people with bachelor's degrees who want to get into this work. So it's not so much a mismatch. We have far too few students who are well prepared in STEM on the one hand. And number two, we do have to look at opportunities at the community college level and in these programs that will give people credentials that don't have to be a degree. Both are very important.
Freeman, how well is the dialogue working between you and your institution and the enterprises in your area that need need properly skilled employees? Is that dialogue flowing well?
You know, I'm very encouraged by this Greater Washington Partnership. And so you have institutions from Virginia Tech all the way through the DC area up to UMBC, Hopkins. We're all a part of this Greater Baltimore, Greater Washington Partnership. And that corridor is so important, but employers are working with us and with our faculty to look at the particular skills that people need. I can't overemphasize, though, the importance of a broad education to learn how to learn. And it goes with some of what Frida was saying about the soft skills, how we learn how to collaborate, the personality and those things. But the other piece that I think we often miss is that too few Americans are getting the STEM background. I'm a mathematician, are getting that STEM background that will prepare them on that hard side, that hard technical side for the jobs. Too few people actually make it through the bachelor's programs, and we have far too few women in computing areas, and that means giving women more support, and people of color, and people who are first-generation college. And if the economy is to do what it needs to do, we're going to have to make sure we give stronger preparation to those people. The programs that we have for girls, for example, in coding and getting them into that work will be critical for the future.
Great. And we want to come back to this issue about how do we keep the pipeline robust? How do we get people in with the right skills and make sure they get through our programs and graduate? But I want to shift from the Mid-Atlantic to the Midwest. Juan, it sometimes feels to me like this country has overemphasized the four-year degree as the end-all and be-all of an educational path. Does that resonate with you? And does that ignore the fact that we have this large, really kind of thriving community college ecosystem? How do we front and center these alternatives, these higher education alternatives better to give people the skills that they need?
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I think I agree with Freeman, though, that you need all of the above. And you need institutions of higher education working together to produce all of the above. And we've got a long way to go still in the United States of America and in local communities to make sure that, in our states, to make sure that we are in fact doing everything we can as institutions to work together on the full complement of programs, full set of pathways, and in a way that makes them affordable to students. You know, when you think about community colleges, you're talking about 11.8 million students. When you think about this asset that we have, 60% of community college students work full time. Frida's talking about soft skills. 75% work full and or part-time. They are already exhibiting the workplace skills needed and going to school. And yet the attention that is paid upon them by companies when you get to the hiring process, you know, has left them out. Because, you know, as one CEO said, you know, most HR leaders don't get fired for hiring people with 4-year degrees. But once they venture into this new territory of expanding and widening, you know, the universe from which they can draw talent, you know, they get a little nervous, right? And that is the big challenge that we have. And by the way, if we want to be an inclusive society, you have to think about, you know, what 41% of undergraduate students, they are in community colleges. If you want to have a greater pipeline of all of the above, as Freeman talked about, we've got to do better with this population, starting with the community colleges. But for the community colleges to do better, you know, we've got to have access to job opportunities while students are in our institutions, not when they finally get to the place of a 4-year degree. So we got to start a lot earlier with that employer engagement, with work-based opportunities, with apprenticeships. We've done a lot of that work at City Colleges of Chicago. Some of the employers that have been working with us are now launching nationally. Love to talk a little bit more about that. But the main message here is it's not about our institutions. It's about the assets that are in our institutions and the fact that our students and the fact that we're not paying enough attention to them.
Yep.
I love the word you used, which is nervous, about when you were talking about a lot of employers and how they look at these human beings, these assets that your institutions are turning out. How do we calm down the major employers in this country and get them more receptive to taking in talent from more different kinds of places?
Can I ask a question, Andrew? Sorry, just because I think we actually work with employers who want to do just that, and we have some pretty marquee brands, I would say, that really are attempting to. So again, that's the beauty of a soft skill tool, right? That we don't have to look at whether you come from a 4-year degree or a 4-year college, right? We can see, do you have the potential to do this job? And quite frankly, right out of school, what does your resume or your hard skills tell you about someone? I was an English major, and then I became a scientist, right? So, and so I think that how you make them less nervous is by finding alternate ways. Soft skill assessment is one of them, to make them feel like, this person is just the same as this other person over here, even though they don't have the fancy MIT degree or the 4-year degree or whatever credentials they've been historically used to looking at. And quite frankly, that's a lot of what we do with, our brand name employers, is really get them comfortable that they are not, again, there's this whole thing of, that really offends me, this sort of notion that to expand diversity, quality must suffer. And again, I think that's offensive to anyone who really thinks about it hard. But you have to provide people with alternate ways of feeling like everyone is on the same playing field, to make them feel comfortable that they, that trade-off, that supposed trade-off, is not happening. That's my perspective. So,
Juan, does that sound right? Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I do think that, it also requires the business leaders, really solving a business challenge that they have and looking at all options available to them in solving the business challenge that they have in front of them. And, as, one of the CEOs that we work with very closely at Aon often says, this is, fixing the deficiency of the supply of talent. It's in the business community's hands. All they need to do is begin to, open up their minds to, what occupations are there that can actually add greater value if you're bringing somebody in with a certification or with an associate's degree and continuing to invest in them. This is the key, because what Freeman talked about earlier is, this is not about a student having a limited credential that they can't take anywhere else. This is about a journey that they're on, and these is just starting points along that journey. And so the mindset of the employers is, and the ones that we work with, is to tap into our talent early enough to really take advantage of what they have to offer and support them along their pathway to completing an associate's degree or getting a 4-year degree.
Andy, if I can just jump in there based on what Frida said and Juan, this idea of lifetime learning, this lifelong learning, the notion that they're getting a certificate, they're getting whether it's a degree or certificate, and Juan is so right about community colleges moving towards half of all undergrads, 40-some% right now. I think we can look at some of the employers that are taking advantage of internship programs, apprenticeship programs, to learn more about students and their strengths and ways of working with them. It might surprise all of you to know that national agencies here in the Baltimore, Washington corridor are far more enlightened with that. They are working with kids from NSA to NIH, are working with kids in high school. Many of my students who come to me have been working for a year or two in high school, whether it's in biotech or in IT. And when they come in, they've already learned a lot about working with other people. They've built some strong skills. They have a vision of who they want to be. And we work with them throughout that process. So we are the leading producer of Blacks who go on to get PhDs in STEM. But many of those kids actually started back in high school. And it's about it's a hard and soft skills, but it really does take professionals to pull people into the work, whatever the area, whether it's in the arts or in technology. And so the idea of more hands-on experiences with work with faculty and with employers can make such a difference in the building of the pipeline and inspiring people to think about all these jobs.
And Andrew, can I just say one more thing on this topic?
And then we're going to let Paul talk. But absolutely.
I'm sorry. Then let Paul talk.
No, please.
Later then, no.
If it's a burning issue, we want to hear it.
My only burning issue is that I think to date, the paradigm has been war on talent. And so instead of finding and developing new talent, it's been like, how can I use LinkedIn to go poach my competitors' talent? In no other business line do you do that, because you end up overpaying and it's inefficient. And I mean, I think we have to start applying basic economic principles to talent pipelining and not doing silly things like that. That's it. Burning issue.
That's actually that's a beautiful segue over to Paul, because Paul, you and your team, thank you for that. Paul, you and your team just finished up a really interesting report on where workers are actually getting their skills, where they're acquiring their skills. Can you give us the highlights from that report?
Sure, Andy, thanks. So let me just say to begin with that if you ask me what the kind of core challenges we face in this conversation, it's about two things. One is about low-wage workers. Today, about 20-25% of American workers, adults, are earning less than a wage that supports a family. And that was true before COVID, and that number is worse. And then secondly, due to COVID, there's a huge issue about, this is a bad sounding word, but reallocation, helping the restaurant worker become a healthcare worker, for example. So then the question is, where are they going to get the skills to improve that low wage labor market? What are we going to do for the restaurant worker who needs to become a healthcare worker? The survey that you mentioned was done pre-COVID, January of 2020, just before the world fell apart. It was a survey of adults asking where they learn their job skills and how much training they get from their employers. Overall, in the previous year prior to the survey, about 55% of workers got skills training from their employers. So I can't tell you whether the glass is half full or half empty. I can tell you, though, there were huge disparities. So African Americans and Latinos got less training than did Anglos. People with low levels of education got less training than people with high levels of education. And people who are contractors got less training than regular standard workers. So there were big disparities. And that's the case for a public system, is addressing those disparities. And I'll tell you one more thing about the public system. We know what works. We know that community colleges, when you get your certificate or your degree, pays off. as Freeman would jump into saying, he's absolutely right. When you get your 4-year degree, it pays off. And job training programs, high quality job training programs also pay off. The issue isn't coming up with a bright, shiny new thing.
Right.
The issue is expanding at scale what we know works,
Yes.
getting employers to buy into it and put their political heft behind it, which they are not doing now. And frankly, getting governors, because this is about regional labor markets, getting governors to kick butt and get these stovepipe bureaucracies to work together. Yep. That's what the challenge is. In some sense, it's a political, social challenge. It's not inventing a new way of trainings for skills. It's taking what we know what works and making it happen at scale.
Paul, which stovepipe bureaucracies, I'll use your phrase, are not talking to each other very well right now? Who do we need to encourage to?
So there's variation across states in this, but if you think about the higher education system, including the community colleges, as one stovepipe, you think about the workforce system, the job training system is another, the employment service is a third, and the K-12 system is a fourth. Getting those bureaucracies to interact and create a seamless system for people, and then getting employers, as several people have said in this panel, to take seriously what community colleges can deliver, what 4-year schools can deliver. You know, I talk to a lot of community colleges, and the CEOs will say, "Oh yes, we want to work with you," and the human resource departments won't. And making that happen is the challenge.
Go ahead, Frida.
Juan, go ahead.
Someone seems surprised, but I think that unfortunately, you know, that is a little bit of the dynamic, right? That, you know, potentially top leadership is bought in, but then it's sort of the middle layer hiring managers that then start to question, you know, is this the right talent, and, you know, X, Y, and Z. So that doesn't surprise me.
Juan?
I just want to add, this is all about investing in these assets. You know, the low-wage workers that Paul's talking about, those are our students. I said earlier, they're working in low-wage jobs, trying to work their way out. I'll tell you something that happened in COVID. We have one of our 7 colleges that focuses on healthcare. The only college in the Chicago region that grew by 5%. Every other college, community college, enrollment dropped by an average of 14%.
Ooh.
So people are moving, right, to where there is opportunity and where there is scale and where there are programs that are actually, you know, working. And I want to share another promising thing that we're doing in Chicago to break down this, you know, stovepipes that Paul's talking about. You know, we have built a joint strategic plan with our Chicago public school system, 2 very large systems of education, the K-12 system in our entire city and the community college system, have said to ourselves, we are going to be one team. When we talk to employers about building the opportunities, as Freeman said, from high school years through community college, we are going to be speaking to them together. We're going to be building these opportunities together. We're going to be figuring out how our institution can bring all of the assets, the certifications, and the programs that we have into the high school setting while students are in high school, so they can get the exposure that they need to reach career paths. And so, you know, I think that while governors can play a role, you know, I really think that it has to start with us, those leaders of the stovepipe institutions themselves.
Sure. I mean, Andy, if I could just piggyback on what Juan was just saying, I think we are fortunate in Maryland in that we have more bipartisan participation and cooperation than most places. With a Republican governor, Democratic legislature, and yet we are investing in public higher education and in K-12 education. But most important, mindset is really important. And so what I would say that's encouraging here is that we are working with our community colleges very closely and with the employers from the public to the private side. Remember, we have all these agencies here, and there are all kinds of jobs available. But I want to add on to that something that the one was saying, and working with K-12. Those middle school years, as a math teacher, I will tell you, those middle school years and building the math and reading skills, along with a sense of self, Frida, and those other skills are really important. And what I have found most encouraging is that our Maryland Business Roundtable, coupled with what's going on in that Greater Washington Partnership, are people who want to help in that pipeline to build those skills. And for so many students, not just low-income kids, but for so many people who are afraid of math and science, who are getting degrees in the humanities, for example, in the arts, many opportunities can be available for them that will involve some technology, and there are ways of being creative. The language I like to use is the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. That's from Jim Collins. But it's the idea, it's not one way or the other. It's how do we connect ways to get people opportunities.
So let me
there is no shortage of energy. Paul, let me say one quick thing first. There is no shortage of energy around this conversation, as we can tell. I've been informed by our organizers that we are under the 10-minute mark. So I need to ask everyone's forgiveness in advance. When it comes time to stop, I'm going to intervene in a hopefully somewhat pleasant way, and we will need to stop on time. But Paul, before you make your comment, one question that we had come in asks where somebody can find a copy of your report. It's available on the MIT Work of the Future website. Is that right?
So the Work of the Future website will have a report by me that summarizes some aspects of that survey. And in addition, someone could send me an email and I'll send you a longer paper on it. The question I just want to pose, though, if we accept the idea that we kind of know what works, then the issue is really getting that to some scale. Mm-hmm. And so I would suspect that in Chicago, in the Baltimore area, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who need the kind of training and skills that Juan or Freeman or others could provide, who are not getting it. Right. And so, I mean, there's really an issue here about why we underinvest as a society in these issues and how to change that. And again, I really think that it needs to be a political issue. It needs to be front and center in the public discussion about equity and movement and helping people out and transitioning to a new labor market and a new economy. And it's not enough to say we've got a good model, that that we've got some cooperation. It's only enough when you're at some level of scale, and that's the challenge.
But Paul, let me ask you on that. If we gave you the magic wand and let you wave it one or two times to do exactly what you just said, to scale up the things that we know work, what would you do with that wand?
I would do two things with that wand. One is I would provide resources. You just can't pretend that you can deliver without resources. And secondly, I would pull together in a region the employers, community groups, and the training and education providers, and this is an exaggeration, lock them in a room and tell them that they're going to need to come up with a system to create pipelines and channels for people. And that's what I would do. And you see that at a small scale, right? Freeman talks about the Washington Compact. Juan talks about what's going on in Chicago. You see it at a small scale. You're not seeing it at a large scale.
Okay. Got it. Gang, we are at 5. Freeman, super quick, please.
No, go ahead.
We're at 5 minutes, unfortunately. And a question came in that I really think focuses us on a lot of the issues here. And the question is, okay, let's take an archetypal middle-aged, mid-career worker who has not had a deep STEM background, but been on the job for 20 years, has excellent soft skills, but they need to know what to go do next or how to get matched to the right opportunity. How do we help that archetypal person?
But that's where the soft skill piece comes in, Andrew, because it's different soft skill profiles make you better suited for different things, right? After I was a scientist, was I going to be an entrepreneur? Was I going to go into marketing? I mean, that's where soft skill comes in. It's not just there are these soft skills which make you good for everything. No, if you have certain types of soft skills, you will be better. And that's what that's what the matching component of soft skills is so critical to this equation, because it basically ignores your resume and says, I know what you've done. Let me tell you what you could do, and provides you a whole arena of things that you may not have ever considered before based on a soft skill match. Does that make sense?
So we've had some experience with this historically. Under the last two administrations, there's Trade Adjustment Assistance Act, provide funds for training, and the Obama administration provided a lot of funds to community colleges. under the TAACT, the TAACT program. So we have kind of a background in what works for so-called dislocated workers, middle-aged workers. Part of it's what Frida says, it's the soft skills. Part of it is people haven't been in school, and it's an uncomfortable setting for them. And
is that a fixable problem?
Yes, it is a fixable problem. There were successful TAACT programs in community colleges around the country. It's been evaluated. There are models that work.
And we need to look at the different pathways. We have large numbers of adults who come back, who started degrees and never graduated, who are and can work with counselors on the campus. And what people learn is that the experiences they've had in life are far more valuable than they realized when they come back. They can think critically and they can make decisions. And so I think we do need to be scaling up what we're doing. I think Paul is absolutely right. I would suggest that looking at what we do, not just with the employers and the school system and our university system of Maryland, but what we're doing in the state, the funding from the state, but also at the federal level and in foundations in moving in that direction. We're replicating the Meyerhoff program for underrepresented kids to go and get PhDs in science. And Howard Hughes is doing that and the Zuckerberg Foundation, quite frankly, out in California.
Freeman, we're at 2 minutes. I have one super quick follow-up for you, and then we're going to kick it to Juan and see if he has last words for us. Freeman, what are the main reasons why people start one of your degree programs with the best of intentions and then don't make it through?
My TED Talk talks about the fact that 2/3 of students who begin with a career or major in science leave it, of all races. So we still have a weed-out culture here in science and technology in America. And that's at all kinds of universities, public and private, to the most prestigious. And so we have to rethink. That's what we've done at UMBC, is to rethink, reimagine how we teach and learn and bring the research into it and hands-on experiences. We need and many more apprenticeship programs. So we are weeding out so many students in these technology areas. Got to change that approach.
Juan, we're putting you on the spot for brilliant final words.
Student supports have to be just as important as the academics because our students require the student supports. Those work-based learning opportunities, they mean everything, especially for students who don't get that normally in just living their lives. They're not around those environments. And so we need to produce them in large and quantifiable ways. And we need to keep education affordable, okay? Students cannot afford the price tag that we have today. It's simply too high.
All right, I've been informed that we have 30 seconds left. If anyone has a sub 30-second final comment, we are all ears.
I think let me just say the comment that Juan made about supports is absolutely fundamental. The job training programs that work successfully consistently provide supports to students to keep them in. So that's fundamental.
Look at our UMBC Meyerhoff program, because it is producing larger numbers of blacks who go on to the top levels, and we need some at the top too. And look at the woman who's leading NIH's efforts with the vaccine. It's a little kid who came through those high school programs, Dr. Corbett, and now she's a black woman making history with the vaccine. So keep hope alive.
Everyone, the old line about MIT is that it's a drink from a fire hose. I think we've experienced that on this panel, but I think we are all better hydrated than when we started. Paul, Freeman, Juan, Frida, thank you guys so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you.